In first grade, when I was painting with poster paints, I painted a boat and I made the smoke go the right direction, and my first grade teacher told my mom, you should nurture his artistic ability. I've been a visual person ever since. I was an art director, I'm a designer, and I just love how the Cube looks. I mean, it's just the coolest looking computer on the planet.
The first reaction I had to the size of the G4 Cube was really one of amazement, because if you had asked me in advance how small can a supercomputer be, I never would have come close to what I saw.
3.5 gigaflops. Now that is 3.5 billion operations per second. It is staggering by any measure. 10 years ago, it was unheard of in anything smaller than a washing machine.
The heart of the G4 Cube is incredibly complex. I mean, it's a supercomputer. But we were looking for a final design that was very simple. A design that left you with a sense of, well, of course, that's the most natural, the most elegant solution possible.
All the kind of functional characteristics are taken care of, but then there's another level of aesthetic that just lifts it and gives it spirit.
Most computer companies would have said, this is an impossible task. They would have walked away from it. I mean, to take a computer 4 times its size and pack it down into an 8-inch cube, it seems impossible, but we did it.
Being this big and being able to sustain 1, 2, 3, or 4 gigaflops, we are looking at 2,000 times the volume efficiency of, say, a Cray supercomputer of the 1980s.
The G4 Cube starts out with 64 megabytes of memory, expandable up to 1.5 gigabytes of RAM. It starts with a 20 gigabyte hard drive, configurable up to 40 gigabytes. It's got all the I/O you could ever want. Ethernet, USB, FireWire, everything you need is in the Cube.
The Adobe user is going to love it. It has everything they require. It has the power of a G4, but it has the elegance and the design element that they care about.
The G4 Cube is designed to go onto your desk, so we saw that it was crucial that we could remove both visual and audible clutter. So the team figured out a way to actually remove the fan, the product's air cooled, so that it's virtually silent.
Instead of sitting down at a computer that's humming and you kind of feel technology in the room, you're sitting down in the silence where you can sit and have an idea.
The DVD has a nice element of surprise in the way that it rises from the top of the cube, just like magic.
You flip it over, there's this little latch that you hit and it pops up and you can pull the entire core out. It almost looks like this nuclear reactor core, something that you'd see in Mission Impossible.
There's easy access to all the RAM, to the airport cards, to the graphics cards. You don't have to then say, gee, I'm going to upgrade the memory. What expert am I going to have to find? It's something that really an 8-year-old can do in about 15 seconds.
Along with this amazing little cube, you have a new keyboard, a professional new mouse. It's optical, so there's nothing to clog your jam.
We reduced the speakers to an elemental form, the sphere. They're elegant, very simple, and they sound outrageous.
I love the new flat panel display. I just think both the big one and the smaller one are just the most beautiful things. Other people are totally in love with the way the new CRT looks. That see-through back end it's just so Apple.
The new G4 Cube is the ultimate desktop movie making machine. It comes with iMovie 2 software, or if you're a professional, you can step right up to Final Cut Pro.
You get an idea, you walk out, you film it, you bring it back, you download it through FireWire, you can play with it in Final Cut Pro, add type, whatever, and boom, it's done.
Whether you do publishing, web design, video editing, this machine was made for you.
If I had only seen the PowerMac G4 Cube, I would have been very impressed. I would have said, this is going to be a very important product for Apple and for users. But it didn't stop there, and from one experience to the next, it just kept getting better and better. And I left kind of scratching my head thinking, is there anything that's missing from this product offering? And I'm still thinking, because I don't think there is.
thing that I'm most thrilled with is that the products are, I mean, they are very different, but that together they do relate as one very harmonious family.
Steve loves doing ta-da and pulling the sheet off of stuff, and it was just another one of those ta-das where you go, holy shit, I've done it again.
Hello, I'm Greg Rutke of Rutke Mods, and welcome to episode 17 of season 2 of my PowerPC series. In today's episode, well, it's been a long time coming. Today's episode will be introducing you to my PowerMac G4 Cube. This is a very special PowerMac G4 Cube, and it's taken a very long time to get it to work right. A very long time. And I'll be going into detail about that coming up later in the video. But this system right here is a very neat system. It's not finished yet. I was going to wait until it was completely finished, but at this point it's getting kind of silly how long it's taken to film this video. So I thought, well, it's working 100% right now, even though it's not finished being upgraded. It's probably a good time to film it. So set this down here, and just a heads up, guys, if you hear any loud fan noises or anything, I'm re-rendering episode 16. It got copyright claimed. Long story, but I had a feeling it might be coming, so it's no issue, and I'm taking care of it myself. But anyway, I figured I'd do that while filming this. The G4 Cube was a very unique system. It was a system that did not sell well at all, but it was a very innovative system, and design, everything was very cool. But it wasn't as cool as Apple thought it would be for the consumer market. Well, the professional market, let's go with that. These were Power Macs. These were full-fledged Power Macs. Power Mac G4s, just like my G4 Graphite, the Gigabit Ethernet model, which came out at the same time. This has the same hardware in it as a Gigabit Ethernet, except it's they originally only came with one core CPUs in them. And I have a dual CPU setup in this now from a Graphite. The CPUs are 100% compatible between the two, but you have to custom modify it. And we'll go into more detail about that as the video progresses. But this system did not sell well. Its price range was somewhere in the middle of a full-size tower, really. And it just wasn't worth it because it wasn't as upgradable. And that's the reason why people didn't buy them. But there's a very colorful history for the Cube, even though it didn't even make it a year. It came close, but Apple discontinued the system about 2-3 weeks before a year was up. They introduced it in September of 2000 and ended it in September of 2000. They introduced it, I think, September 23rd and ended it like September 9th. And it was one of Apple's biggest flops. It was one of the biggest failures Apple's ever had. And there's no real figures on how many were actually sold. In fact, the only thing that I've been able to find is maybe 150,000 were shipped. That doesn't mean they were all sold. And that's not a lot in Apple's terms. But like I said, they weren't as upgradable. Later on, these got more popular, especially with the Mac modding communities. And people were able to upgrade them and do crazy things like I've been doing with this system. And being able to fit more heavy-duty stuff into it. But it also takes a lot of modification because the case is so small on the inside. And this system actually isn't that small when you think about it. We'll lift it up again. If you compare this to the size of my chest, it is a very big system considering. And it weighs probably, I don't know, I'd say 20 pounds, 10 pounds, 10 pounds. And that's not counting the power supply. The power supply is about a third the size of this. That also took up space. Okay, we'll go into the details about the power supply later. But when you consider everything, it wasn't super small. And yet it was so small that you couldn't fit normal modern day at the time things into it. So the only things that were really upgradable in these systems was the hard drive. Apple didn't really want you to upgrade the CPUs or anything like that. And really, the most user upgradable thing was the airport card. Most of them didn't come with them, but you could upgrade them to it. This one has one. But hard drive was basically the only thing you could really upgrade without Apple getting all mad and stuff. And it was pretty easy, but it's still a system that doesn't support big drives. So 128 gigabytes is the most it will support, hard drive size wise. Or you could custom format it and stuff if it was a bigger drive and split it into different formats before sticking it into the system. But the biggest partition it will read is 128 gigabytes. This system has been upgraded, as I showed you when I unboxed it originally. It has been upgraded with a 100 gigabyte hard drive, and now this system is running OS 9, Tiger, and Leopard in it, and it is really ready to go. We're going to go into details when I show you the system, what I had to go through to get it to run, and just how much this has cost me. I'm not going to really tell you how much it cost, but you'll be able to figure it out by how much stuff I've bought for it so far. It's not been cheap. But anyway, so I hope you guys look forward to this episode, and let's go. Okay, so we'll start off by showing a size comparison between the G4 Cube and the G4 Mystic, aka the Gigabit Ethernet model PowerMac G4. Now, this is the size difference, really. If we look at these systems, first off, here's the Cube and the power supply. When you're considering the size, you have to consider the power supply too. And we'll go into more detail about this power supply coming up, but this is what you have to deal with when it comes to size, and this is before you get the ADC monitor and the keyboard and anything else that needs to go with the system. So this whole thing has to be together to run. Where this, it just needs a power cable. The power supply is built right in. Okay. Now, the aesthetics of these two are very similar. Both silver, plastic with graphite Apple logos on them, as we can see here. That was Apple's professional color for around the year 2000 all the way through mid-2001. It was short-lived, but you know, the graphics are nice. Actually, they did come out, graphite came out in mid-99, so yeah. Let's turn this thing around. It's still got rubber feet on it, so it's a little harder to slide around. If we compare them though, they're about the same thickness, as we can see here. The graphite is about a third higher than the Cube, but other than that, these are the sizes. And when you think about it, this isn't taking up a whole lot more space, and you get a lot more with it. For instance, you get a full-sized optical drive, you get a zip drive, you get a speaker. These don't have speakers. These don't have any sound equipment at all in them, and if you want sound, you have to use a USB sound device. We'll go into more detail about that in a second. But this has a speaker in it. Okay. This thing's expandable. Very expandable. As we can see here. If we flip the cube around, let's try to flip this with one hand. Okay. Okay. So, for instance, this has 2 USBs, that does 2. That has 2 FireWires, that does 2. But we start getting into things like you have the option of upgrading to USB 2.0 or any other card you really want that is Mac compatible with a graphite tower, as compared to this where you can't upgrade any of the cards except the video card, and that's an iffy thing. We'll go into more detail about that too. But as we see here, built-in power supply, all this really nice stuff that made these sell better than these, because let's show you the biggest thing about the Cube. The biggest, one of the coolest selling points, oops, I'm sure it's fine. One of the biggest selling points was this. We'll lift this up by pressing down and letting go. Now we have a handle. It pulls right out. So, click the handle back down, and we'll turn it on its side here. And this is the insides of the Cube. If we compare it to the graphite inside, this would be for the Sawtooth or the Gigabit Ethernet. The Sawtooth had been sold before the Cube, and then the Gigabit Ethernet came out. People were probably buying Sawtooths over this also on the used market, because let's open this up. Look at all this room, and it's not a whole lot bigger than that. Alright, you know, you can only fit certain size video cards into this. It holds a max of 1.5 gigs of RAM, and this holds a max of 2 gigs. At the time, you could go with 512 more megs of RAM. Really nice. These came with the option of a single core CPU at 400 megahertz, or you could have a dual 450 or dual 500. This, of course, is my overclocked dual 500. This came with a 450 or 500 single. Okay. This had enough room where you could basically cram as many hard drives as you could into it. Right now I have 2 in here. This had enough room for 1 hard drive. As we can see, we're just getting more and more further down the rabbit hole here. We have a zip drive built into the system. We have a full-size desktop optical drive in here. This has a slot load drive that the springs go bad in, and the drive won't eject any longer. This drive's got bad springs in it, and to get the disk out, you literally have to pick the thing up while it's running, hit the eject button, and start shaking it up and down, which, needless to say, isn't good for the hard drive, nor is it good for basically anything else connected to it either. So, yeah, I don't put disks into this drive. But it was a neat idea. The drives weren't built very well. And the last real big thing about this is this has a fan built into it. Why is that a big deal? That's because these things are convection cooled from the factory. We'll go into more detail about that in a second. But the reason why people bought this over that was because you had the option of getting a dual 450 or a single 450 for about the same price, I believe. And the dual 450, look at all this room in here. Which would you buy? So we'll put the graphite back away, and we'll actually cover the Cube. So I'm going to put this back together really quick, and we'll start off by showing you everything in here. Okay. So we'll start off by looking around here. This system, it was an interesting design. They like to brag about how it looked like it was floating. The thing is, as the plastic ages and stuff, you can definitely see the plastic. It's not really floating when you look. But it does, from a distance, look like it's floating in midair. This part from here up is the computer. This is an exact cube. It's 7 inches by 7 inches by 7 inches. But once you add the acrylic case to it, it's not really a cube. It's some kind of rectangle. Okay? So, yeah, a little false advertising when you think about it. But as we go over to the top here, we'll tell you a few things about this. First off, if you see here, there's a nick. This system had some light scratches on it and stuff, but this nick, I had a little oops while filming one of the episodes of the Mac Pro series, and I'll show you that clip really quick. And all of a sudden you realize it won't boot anymore. And it becomes a really huge, heavy aluminum brick that you can just toss to the side. Oops. It probably wasn't good for that. Yeah, it just really makes you want to cringe, doesn't it? The system fared out really nicely, though, even though I slammed a 50-plus pound Mac Pro into it at full force. Just a small little nick. I can probably buff it out, but I'm not too worried about it. Now, there were some really neat things about this system, but there was also other things that weren't as neat. For instance, these were convection cooled. They had no fans. They were fanless. Pretty neat until they start overheating. And of course, you know how Apple's thermal paste can be. It can overheat after a while, and these things are notorious for baking themselves, especially the video cards and all that stuff. So that's one problem. I told you about the optical drive being stuck. Discs will go in, they won't come back out. They're supposed to go in, and then when you hit the eject button, they're supposed to spring back up. This one doesn't. That's another problem. Here we have a proximity sensor kind of touch button here. There are no physical buttons on this Mac except for the reset and program button on the bottom of the system. But anything you can see without flipping this thing upside down, this is the only Mac ever made with no physical buttons. This is really neat. You don't even have to touch it to turn it on. You can just hover your finger over it. That much of a distance, it will turn on. The problem is, they could get really sensitive and randomly turn themselves on with wind blowing over them. Okay, anything. If you swiped your hand over it by accident, it would turn on. If you swiped your hand over it while it was on, it would go into sleep mode. Sometimes it would just randomly go into sleep mode. Sometimes it wouldn't turn on. The buttons, they don't work very great. And in fact, the buttons have the tendency of dying. They are very sensitive to any electrical pulses going through them, and if you blow one component on the board, let me grab one here. If you blow one component on this board, I've got a few of these. This one's actually going to a friend of mine. He needs one. If you blow any component on this board, the button will stop working, and if it's certain components, it will go into a boot loop and just keep kicking on and off. And there's only one way to turn this on, is with this button. Unless you have an ADC monitor, then you can disconnect this button and turn it on with that, which I had to do the first time one of the buttons blew in this. Like I said, this has been a pain to get running. So, anyway, put this button up. And let's spin the system around. Okay, so one of the popular upgrades to do with this is to put a fan in it, and this system especially needed a fan, and we're going to tell you about that. So let's tilt this forward. Okay, so let's first look at the ports on the bottom. We have a Gigabit Ethernet. I think that's Gigabit Ethernet. It should be. So we have a Gigabit Ethernet, reset button, program button to flash the firmware, 2 FireWire 400, USB 1.1 ports, dial-up modem, the power jack. It's proprietary, and if the power supply goes bad, you can't turn this thing on. So that's another problem. There's a reason why this was a giant flop. Then, these came from the factory with a VGA and ADC port video card. It could come with a Radeon 7500, I think, a GeForce MX2, or stock from the factory they came with. If you didn't choose, they came default with the Rage 128 Pro. This has the 128 Pro in it. We'll quickly go into the cards I've had in this already. As we can see, this is a very small slot to fit things in. Let's open it up and we'll go into more detail about that. So the only thing you gotta do is push down, the handle comes up, it unlocks the case, and you can just lift it up like that. And then there we go. Now, the problems with these is you can only fit certain width cards. It's got to be a narrow width card, and it can only be a max of this length here. So you can fit those cards that I told you in this system. Also, you could fit the MX2 Twin View, which I had in this for a while until I snapped a capacitor off of it. This is where we start going into how I messed this system up. I was trying to get the heatsink off the Twin View because Twin Views aren't actually designed for this. They run a lot hotter. Twin View means that it could support 2 displays, so they nicknamed it the Twin View. It's just a beefed up MX2 GeForce card, and it has twice the VRAM in it. They run really, really hot in this system, and they'll cook themselves. And the bracket for the video card actually won't fit, even though it's nearly identical. The ports are slightly different. They're further apart. So, you know, that's a problem. So I was trying to get that heatsink off to put a fan on here, and they're thermal epoxied on, and I snapped a capacitor off of it. That's at Colin Mister's house now, and he's trying to fix it because I think I messed it up even worse. So this system, when I got this and we did the unboxing, I opened it up to, let me see if I do. I opened it up to put a Radeon 9000 in it from AMDD. Okay, this is the 9000. If we notice, it doesn't fit because it's a wider card. To fit this in here, this is basically the most powerful OS 9 card you can get for these systems. And this system, you know, this system will take any card this length in it. It doesn't matter what the width is, as long as you can relocate the VRM right here. The VRM is connected by a 30-pin adapter here, and what you'd have to do is build a custom ribbon cable, take the VRM, and move it down into the area down in here where the hard drive and stuff is. That's what I'm going to do, so I can put this in here eventually. Right now, the Rage 128 Pro really, really sucks, especially for Leopard use. So I'm kind of stuck there right now. we'll put, if we notice this card here, to fit one of these in here, after you put the VRM in, you have to modify the bracket, which I did. And as we notice, it doesn't quite fit perfectly, but I did get it to manage to fit it in there. And I have tested this 9000 in here with a PCI card expansion. I'll show you some pictures right here. Okay, so as you can see the expansions, it did work. It works fine with the 9000 in it, but until the VRM's relocated, I can't do a whole lot. But what you'd have to do is, I have to sacrifice when the screw's holding the bracket in, and you have to sacrifice a lot. This thing's been really modified, as we can see, but when we're done, it will fit. Another thing I could have done is lengthened the hole here, but then that would ruin the originality of the case. I don't want to do that. So we'll put this back up. We'll go into more detail. I am not taking this system apart in this episode, but in the next episode we're probably going to, so I can show you how I upgraded this to a dual CPU system. But getting back to when I first unboxed this thing, let me see if I can find the part. Okay. When I was trying to fit that Radeon 9000 into the system, literally I just finished unboxing it, I just wrapped up the video, and I was in the middle of processing and editing the video, and actually I think at the time it was rendering so I could upload it. Okay, I decided to try to put the 9000 into the system, and I don't know what happened. I still have no clue what happened with it. I figure something grounded out on the VRM, because at the time I didn't realize the card wasn't going to fit, and I was pushing against the VRM apparently. So it must have sent a jolt through here. This, okay, is a really unique expansion here. This is an AGP slot, but on the main board, which I don't have a cube board laying around right now, but on the main board, if you can see in here, it looks like a PCI slot, because it basically is. It's a PCI slot, but it's actually pinned out to be an AGP. And there were a few manufacturers I've read on Wikipedia that did that, but Apple was the most famous for it. They used the PCI slot and then adapted it out to a AGP. Well, whatever sent a jolt through here, it killed the PCI slot. Well, AGP slot, the modified AGP slot. It killed it. It would no longer display video no matter what I plugged into it. So I killed that logic board. That was the first dead logic board. The second dead logic board. As you may have seen in some of my former videos, I've had a lot of cube parts laying around in them. The second logic board came from David Weidman, a guy from Facebook. He sold me his logic board. He ended up selling me his power button and his VRM, because he was parting his cube out at the time. So half of this was his system. Well, I blew that board up twice. One time I blew up a voltage regulator chip that was on the underside of the logic board. Replaced that, no problems. But when I was making the adapter to expand the VRM, I wired it backwards apparently and blew that board too. And I've gone through, I think, 2 or 3 VRMs. Remember when I said this system was really rare and really expensive to find stuff for? Well, it's been a chore, and I've gone through a lot to do it. You could nickname me the Cube Killer. So, yeah. This time, I decided to let Colin make the VRM adapter. He's making it and fixing my twin view, but I may not be using that twin view if I relocate the VRM. The twin view happened to also be David's card. But anyway, this is the adapter that blew the first board, and then the VRM blew the second board twice. And then I bought a whole entire system that was from, I guess, an art class. It just came like this. It didn't have the acrylic shell. I took that and pulled the logic board and stuck it in here. And it's worked ever since with no issues. So anyway, so getting back to cooling issues. Let's lock the latch down. We'll look down into the heatsink here. Okay. You can't see a whole lot with that in there. Like I said, I'm not taking the system apart tonight, but we will be doing that. So I don't know if we can actually show you. But if I took the optical drive cover off, you'd be able to see in here that I have wired a fan in here. Apple originally designed this system to probably be upgradable. They were probably going to introduce the next model, if this sold well, as a dual CPU with a fan in it. Now, Steve Jobs was always against fans. He always believed that everything should be quiet and fans shouldn't be needed. The Apple III was one of those examples in Apple history that it needed a fan. He didn't want a fan in it. It was a giant piece of aluminum case that heat sinked everything. The thing is, it still needed airflow, and it was the famous Apple tells you to drop your system to fix all the loose joints from the heat. Well, this is one of those systems, really. It needed a fan. For instance, the later iMac G3s, the slot loads were also convection cooled, and they would eventually start overheating and dying also. This was basically the same. What would happen is the heat, this is the bottom, by the way, the heat would come in through the bottom, the fresh air would come in, and then the heat would pull the fresh air through and into this heat sink. But Apple probably did tests with the dual CPUs, figured out it wasn't going to work, so they never released that. And since Steve Jobs didn't want fans in it, they didn't put fans in it. But this system could actually fit a fan. There's brackets built into the system to fit a 15 millimeter 80 millimeter fan. 15 millimeters thick, 80 millimeter fan. Okay? You could slide it in, it would be held in. Well, this will also hold a 25 millimeter thick fan if you slide the brackets out. You bend them a little bit, and the fan just sits right in. And that's what I did, and I wired that straight into the power supply's Molex cable. It's not hurting any extra power or anything. There's plenty enough power going through this system. That's not going to be a draining issue. But I had to put the fan in here because this has a dual 450 in it from a Gigabit Ethernet. Okay? And you have to modify the 450. I don't know if we can really see it in here. If I can get the light in here, we might. But as we can see, this is the CPU card. And if we look down in here, we can see one of the CPUs. See that shiny piece right there? Down in there under the CPU? That is actually a penny. I modified this heatsink because the single core CPUs use a this heatsink has a hump here that only fit the single cores, and the single core would fit on this hump here. But since it's a dual core, the CPUs sit side by side of the hump. To get it to fit, we have to use pennies. You use pennies that are pure copper. So anything made before 1982 or 3. Something like that. You sand them down, get them nice and smooth, make copper blanks, and then you thermal paste them together and stack them together and set it on there. It works great. This thing cools better than it probably did without the fan. It runs cooler than it did without the fan and with the dual core in it. And this thing fits great. The only thing you have to do with those factory cards is you have to relocate the coil right here. And what I did is I just uncoiled it, the copper wire on the coil one time, unsoldered it, bent it sideways, and then soldered it back in. And that's the only thing. It will fit and it will work. Because like I said, this system is literally a G4 Gigabit Ethernet in a really, really small package with one less RAM slot. That's it. It's 100% compatible with everything that was in this, CPU-wise anyway. And this would also fit sawtooth CPUs. Basically, the CPUs that are in this are the same as the sawtooth CPUs, the card. It's the same thing. Actually, I've got one of those cards up here too. I can show you. Here it is. Okay, so that's what the card looked like. Okay, that's what would be in the sawtooth. It would also be in the single core Gigabit Ethernet, and it's what came in this. Okay, just one CPU. And then I ended up doing a dual CPU, which you've seen many times. You'll be seeing it in the next episode because I'm going to be overclocking the 450 in this and showing you how to take this system apart and put a dual CPU into the cube. I'm looking forward to making that video, and it's going to be very soon because I want to get this to a dual 500. So yeah, that was the original, and then I'll show you a picture of the dual core. I don't have my other one laying around right now to show you, but you'll be seeing that in the next episode anyway. So basically that's all that was on the inside of this. This takes a full-size desktop hard drive, all that stuff. The case is made out of aluminum. Well, actually, I'm not really sure. The case looks, actually I think that's titanium. Okay, so the case is made out of titanium, like the PowerBook titanium. That's titanium. Okay, this is painted titanium. This is stainless steel. That's stainless steel. So it's titanium and stainless steel and acrylic. Okay, so anyway, let's look quickly in here just to show you what the inside of the acrylic case looks like. You can see the latch catches there. So when we set everything down in here, and as we notice here, that is for Wi-Fi. The airport card, Wi-Fi antennas, it's got to go through the stainless steel case here. It comes through here. This uses a regular airport card. So anyway, one last thing since I have this out. If you decide to go to a more high-end CPU, this will basically support CPUs from any aftermarket CPU that was made for the Gigabit Ethernet will work in this with no problems, except they may have to be modified, and they recommend going to a higher end VRM. The factory ones could be beefed up a little bit with extra chips. I fried one of them trying to do that. Or there's a company in Japan that still makes these. Custom makes VRMs. They're actually shorter than this, and you don't have to relocate them. And then you can put a full-size card in here too. Really neat design, but they cost $200 each, so I'm sticking with the factory one. But you know, using a Gigabit Ethernet dual CPU card won't fry this probably. Using an aftermarket might, so you have to consider that. But you know, that's just one of the reasons why this thing's so hard to upgrade. Anyway, so we will now take this, stick it in the case and hook everything up. There we go. And one last thing, I mentioned earlier this doesn't have USB either. It doesn't have a sound card. It needs a USB sound card. These came with, they were basically Pro speakers before Pro speakers. They were the acrylic orb speakers, like a Pro speaker. They came with a USB amp. And they're Harman Kardon designed and all that stuff. Little black USB box and all that stuff. It plugged into a USB port. And that's where you'd get your sound. And even your boot sound would come through those speakers. What I had to do to fix that issue, because I can't find those speakers and they're really expensive. Even the broken ones are expensive. Ones I could rebuild. What I had to do is, Newegg sells these actually, Saiba USB sound cards. These are OS 9 and up compatible, believe it or not, and Newegg still sells these for like $5 a pop. Very recommended if you have a Cube. Basically the only thing I ever do is I just plug it straight in. Then I have a set of USB powered speakers. Then I plug the USB into that, the speakers into that. We'll show you those speakers in a second. Last thing before we hook this up, because I almost forgot, let's talk about the power supply. The power supply is a huge, giant brick. And this thing is made out of really, really, really cheap plastic. And they run really, really hot. When I'm not using my Cube, I leave it unplugged, because even when it's not on, it's hot. This thing radiates heat. You can basically see the heat coming through the power supply. They get really hot. They are notorious for blowing up. And like I keep saying, they didn't sell many Cubes, so there's not many power supplies out there. I am lucky this thing works. And like I said, they get really hot. You can see discoloration from the heat, and from the heat causing the case to expand, it caused it to crack. Okay? It's not a very good power supply. These are 205 watt power supplies, plenty enough to power that, and even max that thing out. Okay, because that thing maybe will use 100 watts the way it is. That's just a guess, but still, it doesn't use a whole lot of wattage, so 205 is plenty enough. The thing is, these things run so hot. When they're on, they run even hotter when that's on. But when it's just plugged into the wall and this is not doing anything, it gets hot. So, it's concerning. I wouldn't even recommend setting it on carpet. So, yeah, it's the Power Max version of a fire brick, like for a Lombard or Pismo. Okay, these things, I never heard of any of them actually catching on fire, but I wouldn't put it past this thing to catch on fire. It's a gnarly kind of setup there. So anyway, we're going to hook it up to the ADC and go on from there. So before we begin, I would like to cover the ADC display. I really haven't covered it other than telling you it's powered by the Mac and has USB and stuff in it. The ADC display was actually specifically designed for the Cube, and they happened to add it into all the Power Macs of the time also, because the Cube had it also, and it was a Power Mac. But this is a modified ADC display. Since the LCD panel is damaged in it, I took all the shielding out of it. Let's not go into detail about it, but it does look cool, and stuff. The factory models that would have came with this would have had a graphite logo on the back and the front, and a transparent cable with braiding on the inside of it. They look kind of like this, only larger scale. But other than that, it's the same display. that would have came with it from the factory, so that's all proper. Now, I also want to show you real quick how my speakers are plugged in. Everything could be plugged in through the display, but then I'd have no way to power the speakers. These are USB powered speakers, which I'll show you in a second what they are. But I literally have it plugged in like that. So, you know, this does nothing but power the speakers, and this is where the audio comes from. So it's plugged into that. And real quick, let's show you the ADC connector. That's what it looks like. It's literally a DVI cable with power and USB built into it. And that's literally the only thing really different about it. It is wired a little differently, but there are pass-through cables, which I have one over there. I'll show you when I set this thing up, which converts it from a ADC to DVI if you need to do that. But still, yeah, I thought we'd just quickly cover that. So I'm going to stand this up and we'll continue it on. I almost forgot to show you guys the conversion cable to convert ADC to DVI. Now this doesn't work the other way around, but if you want to use the ADC port on the video card as a DVI display, you can with this adapter. This was made by Belkin back in the day, and it is literally just a pass-through. It converts these pins to DVI, and it's a really neat adapter. Really hard to find these now, but you can make them also if you had to. So anyway, so let's get back to the video. Okay, so other than not having the factory correct speakers that came with this system that would have looked like pro speakers like this, you know, this is basically a setup you could have gotten with a Cube. It would have came with a pro keyboard just like this, with the black and silver. This was the first generation Pro keyboard, and it has the graphite logo on the back of it. Would have came with one of those. It would have came with the original black Pro mouse, and you could have gotten it with a nice studio display like this, only of course with shielding and, you know, different logos and stuff on it. But still, this is what it would have looked like if you had bought it new, more or less. These speakers right here are really nice speakers for $10. These are $10 USB eBay special speakers that are made by the company called Frisbee. And these are actually really nice speakers. I'd actually recommend if you need a set of really cheap speakers, I mean really cheap, the build quality is not super great on these, but the sound is pretty decent considering, and it's even got a full cone that goes in and out on both sides. Really neat. Got great resonance through the whole thing. You know, these were $10, and they look like they could have been Apple speakers. So that's why I bought them, and I liked them so much I bought 2 more sets. They're really handy speakers, and they look great with this system. They go great with it. So anyway, so let's turn this system on, and I'm going to actually show you how close you can get to the power button before it turns on. I won't touch it. I'm actually not even on it. It's back here. It's hard to look through the viewfinder, but if you look, I'm not touching it. It's not doing anything. Why is it not doing anything? Well, there it went. So, yeah, the sensitivity on the button's not working very well for some reason. Like I said, these buttons aren't super great. Let's shut this thing back off. Let's try again. Okay, well, needless to say, sometimes you can just hover your finger over it and it will work. I don't know what's going on with this button. There might be something on it. But, we can also shut it off with the display here. We can turn it on with the display too, just like that. But yeah, you're supposed to be able to just basically hover over it. You don't have to touch it to turn it on and off. There, it worked that time, but still I was touching it. But you just have to tap it usually and it will turn on, and sometimes you don't have to touch it. So yeah, anyway, so let's let it boot up and do its thing. And welcome to Leopard. I think I forgot to turn my Wi-Fi on. Let's see if I did or not. Yeah, it looks like I forgot to turn my retro router on. Okay, it's turning on. While it's waiting, we'll just look around on Leopard. Leopard is set up on here. It works great. Ugh. Get closer into here. If we look up on the iStat menus, it shows both CPUs. Of course, a factory stock one would only have one. If we go over to this mouse isn't working super great. About this Mac, it says dual 450 PowerPC G4 on it. Really neat setup. Performs incredibly well. I've taken benchmarks and stuff on this. I think these are them, I hope. So we'll let that load up to show you the difference between a single and a dual. So, as we can see, the graphics aren't super great on here because this is the Rage 128 Pro on Leopard. I can't do a whole lot about that. I didn't actually install the drivers like I have on the other systems that have 128 that I run Leopard on, because this is eventually going to have a Radeon 9000 or my TwinView in it. So either way. But as we can see here, this is what a factory 450 would look like. 281 in Geekbench. And a dual 450 modified 418, and I'll be upgrading and overclocking this to a dual 500, and who knows, one day I might find an aftermarket card to modify that would be really, really expensive. But anyway, yeah, so we got all that. To disable cores and stuff on this is really neat. Let's go over to System Preferences. This is built into OS 10, kinda. You need developer tools and stuff to enable this, but you can add the processors option in System Preferences. And then you can control the cores and stuff in your CPU. You can disable the L2 cache, which makes the system slow. It makes it crawl. You can disable one of the CPUs. And as we look up in iStat menus, the second I click disable, it literally turned off the CPU. Really neat. So if I turn, let's turn the L2 cache back on. But, yeah. It gave it a weird spike there. It's weird. But anyway, the CPU is disabled, as we can see here. And if I turn it back on by clicking here, we'll automatically see the other one kick back on. Really neat setup here. It's a very useful thing if you want to determine certain things, run certain tests with one CPU, whatever. It's cool. But anyway, that's Leopard. We'll go more detail about it in a second, but I'm going to take a quick break on filming and also connect this up to the internet and stuff and go on from there. So I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, so I pre-planned everything on this system right now to show you some quick things about Leopard. If you really want to see how this thing performs on Leopard, it literally performs identically to how my Graphite did back in episode 13 of last season. If you want to see that, just click this link right up here. I'm not going to go into super detail about Leopard until at least after I upgrade this system, max it out and stuff, because Leopard doesn't work super great right now. But first off, let's play a little sound through these $10 speakers. I'm not going to turn them up too loud because it's kind of late at night, so that wouldn't be a very good idea for my neighbors. But let's play something real quick. So we'll open up iTunes, which I already had open, but yeah. Anyway, so I'll take this microphone, flip it around like that, and we'll hit play. I can control the volume of the speakers with this control knob here. Pretty neat. Okay, so I'll flip the microphone around here. We'll close out iTunes. And I've already gotten 10.4 Fox loaded up. Like I said, I'm not going to show you a whole lot about this, all the operating systems and stuff. I wanted to show you the hardware today. So let's close out iTunes. If I hit the right button here. It's hard to not have a right click. Here we go. Okay, so that's closing out iTunes. We'll open up 10.4 Fox. I just demonstrated this whole system to my uncle last week. It's working flawlessly on modern day web, but it's slow on modern day web, of course, because it's a sub 1 gigahertz G4 system, so it still struggles a little bit, especially with this video card. So we're just going to use the Classilla user agent to quickly load up a Facebook page to show you how quick this does. We'll open up low-end Mac. There we go. It's loaded up. Pretty darn quick. Very usable. I can post something right now like and we can post it. Post. And there it is right there. It has been posted. You just saw a live Facebook post. I've never done that on my videos before, so I thought that was pretty neat. A neat idea there. So yeah, we've got that. We can just quickly show you some things about Leopard. Like I said, there's not a whole lot to show you because without the proper web display drivers, it doesn't seem to work right. It's really slow and sluggish, and it's just because the GPU. Otherwise, it would perform like it would in episode 13 of last season with my Graphite. So yeah, that shows you just how big of a difference a graphics card can do. But still, as we go through here, this is the whole setup. You know, 2 CPUs, and everything just works. Works fine, except for the DVD drive. I might try to rebuild it one day, but I have a FireWire CD-RW drive now. It's a dual layer, which I think I might just use on this system. Who knows? But anyway, so we got that. We've got the upgraded 100 gigabyte hard drive, and you know, this is the system. You know, it's just a computer running Leopard and using literally half the memory that's in it for some odd reason. It's strange. Oh, because Firefox is running. 10.4 Fox likes to hog memory. But yeah. So let's close that and see if that fixes that problem. If it closes. Yeah, there it goes. And look at memory now. It still hasn't dropped. There it goes. Yeah, it just dropped. You can see the valley right there cutting down. Yeah, it dropped now. So yeah, it's not that's not a Leopard thing. That's the browser. But anyway, so yeah, that's Leopard. It's running Leopard. Leopard runs. You know, you got WebKit on it and everything else that I put on my systems. So anyway, let's restart the system. And we'll boot it into Tiger. Okay, welcome to the boot menu. Just like every other boot menu on Earth, open firmware-wise, the G4 versions seem to be really slow. The G3 ones don't tend to have problems. That was actually not too bad. But G3 ones tend to not have problems. G5 ones tend not to have problems usually. My mid-03 one does sometimes, but still. It's just G4s. Who knows why it takes so long? So anyway, we're booting into Tiger now, and we'll come back when it's finished booting up. Alright, welcome to Tiger. Tiger actually loads quicker. It runs better than Leopard, which is a given. You know, Tiger's the last truly PowerPC operating system, and it shows. It does perform better. Some systems, you know, I'd almost swear Leopard runs better. On here, at least with this GPU, it's definitely Tiger. You know, we have Classic. Can start that up. I don't know if I've actually ever ran Classic on here. We will find out. Yeah, I have apparently. So it's booting up Classic. You know, and it's got everything that Tiger does. You know, we got Classic booting, and you know, I've got 10.4 Fox on here, the PowerPC App Store, and all that stuff. It's Tiger. Tiger is Tiger. Like I say in almost every video now, Tiger's Tiger. It performs like any other PowerPC system running Tiger. You know, except on the really low-end models like the Wall Street. You know, it's Tiger. Tiger works. Tiger works fine. In fact, it gets a stronger Wi-Fi signal than Leopard for some odd reason. Don't know why. But anyway, and you know, we even have sound, which I have the speakers turned down. But yeah, we have sound. And to show you the USB adapter, let's show you that real quick. There's something on the screen. There we go. Okay. It just sees it as a C-Media USB audio device. It works. It works fine. Okay? We'll show you in about this Mac what it looks like plugged in. I don't think it actually shows it in sound. Where is audio? Audio. Yeah, it won't show you that. But under USB, it should show you. That's it. You know, it works. It works just as well as the DAC and the factory speakers probably did. Of course, having factory speakers plugged into that DAC makes a huge difference, but still, it performs incredibly well. And, you know, so we'll restart it one last time and boot it into OS 9. welcome to OS 9. OS 9's OS 9. It looks like, yeah, we're connected to the internet, so let's open up Classilla. It might be connected to the internet. I'm not sure. Did I actually set it up? I did not. Control panels. TCP/IP. It's hooked up, right? Well, for some odd reason, I'm not getting internet. But I can assure you it does work. In fact, I was using it last week with my uncle. I haven't tested it since then, though. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, we do have internet. It's not loading fully for some odd reason, but it's working. There we go. Google's finally working. Everything's sort of working. I might have to reinstall Classilla on here. It looks like some of the images aren't working. I don't know what's going on with it, but it's working, as we can see. You know, we can still browse the internet, and it's nice and smooth. OS 9, like I always say, runs like OS 9 runs on any system that's supported by OS 9. Coincidentally, since we're talking about cubes, I might be doing the video on my G4 Mini finally. There's now a hack out to run G4 Minis on OS 9, and it actually tricks OS 9 into thinking it's a cube. So it's a neat little link there. So anyway, let's quickly go to System Profiler and show you everything. You know, that's the whole system there. Real neat, all this stuff. You know, and like I said, the sound works, which is really neat. That something being sold today that's meant for modern day computers is still being sold at Newegg and works with OS 9. So if we go over to sound, we can see that it is working. It detects the speakers and everything. And it works. Yeah, let's not make you guys go deaf with the tones test, but still, it works fine. Everything works. And you know, I'd go into more detail about this system, but I want to really show you guys what it's like when it's fully upgraded. I'll be showing you games and stuff on it, and just having a good old time. But for now, let's wrap up the video. You know, I said in episode 16 that would probably be the last time to mention the Power Mac G5 giveaway, but I'll mention it one more time since we're still getting close. I've lost count. I think we're, I don't know, 50, 60 away from the giveaway being over. So if you want to enter the Power Mac G5 giveaway and possibly win a Power Mac G5, as long as you live in the United States of America, just click this link right up here, watch the video, and enter. Anyway, so that's been my Power Mac G4 Cube. There's going to be more with this system, especially whenever Colin finishes up my stuff. So, you know, stick around. I'm hoping that next episode we'll be upgrading, overclocking the CPU, and I'll be showing you how to put a dual CPU into a system like this. So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and oh, I almost forgot. I'd also like to thank my new Patreon supporters. I now have a Patreon supporter that can actually have his name come up at the end of the video. If you guys want to like contribute to me and help me out a little bit with my Patreon and stuff, I have a link at the end of the video. And you know, anyway, so sit back and enjoy the Patreon list. It's really short right now, but still. Anyway, so that's the end of the video, and thank you guys for watching. This has been a Rutke Mods video. Hello, I'm Greg Rutke of Rutke Mods, and welcome to episode 17 of... That's really annoying. Should I leave it like that? Of course. Oh yeah, it's nice and stable now that it's fallen off. Hi, I'm Greg Rutke, and my camera's so off kilter I can't do anything with it. It's doing the exact opposite. Hello, I'm Greg Rutke of Rutke Mods, and welcome to episode 17 of season 2 of my Mac Pro series. Wrong series. Hello, I'm Greg Rutke of Rutke Mods. Howdy, I'm Greg Rutke. Hello, I'm Greg Rutke of Rutke Mods, and welcome to episode 17 of season 2 of my PowerPC series. I almost said it wrong, and it threw me off.